Good morning and welcome again to our morning briefing. I'm Jeff Catula, President of the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, and we welcome you today for this important discussion on the natural gas industry. Before we start, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Civil Environmental Consultants, ARC Human Services, Energy Transfer, and CDMG. Thank you again for your continued support. This morning, we're featuring David Spigelmyer, President of the Marcellus Shale Coalition. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Jeff. Welcome. Glad to be with you.
Good morning. Good to see you. Before we start, how's your family doing during this time?
Everyone's great. Having a hard time getting used to one another so much, but it's good.
Well, that's good. I know a lot of people have been saying that it's time for families actually to get together, and there's always a silver lining. So really glad to hear that.
Yeah. I hope you didn't have a hard time finding a place to park this morning.
Well, good morning again. Thanks for being with us and talk about these important discussion items that we have for you concerning the natural gas industry. I wanted to start by asking you really how the natural gas industry has been doing during the COVID-19 challenge in two ways. One, practically, how have your members been dealing with the restrictions in place on how to operate? And secondly, globally, how you see the industry as a whole functioning during this time?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jeff. I mean, there's been volatility in all energy markets across the planet right now. So it's been a difficult time for sure, certainly with COVID-19, stand down in commercial industrial, a lot of commercial industrial applications. That's had a fairly significant impact on demand. We can talk about that in a bit. But for the most part, the upstream and midstream development side has been, to make sure we're providing the natural gas liquids for the primary products that we each use every single day and to heat our homes and to cook our food, dry our clothes, et cetera, is an essential service and required. And so for the most part, our upstream operators continue to provide the level of service and the opportunity to continue to drill for natural gas across Pennsylvania. Rig count's down a little bit. I think we're sitting at 24 active rigs in the Commonwealth. Washington County still is the #2 producer of natural gas. Greene County #3. Susquehanna #1 up in the Northeast. So the southwestern portion of Pennsylvania continues to be a primary deliverer of natural gas, not only for Pennsylvania, but for our country generally.
Over the past several weeks that we have these webinar series, one common theme keeps coming up, and that is how our local companies have been responding to help our frontline workers, those involved in keeping our community safe. And I know the natural gas industry has been in the forefront of that. Tell me a little bit about what your members have been doing to meet a lot of these challenges locally with our first responders.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jeff. And it's a thing that one of the things I'm really proud of is that even in a really tight time for a lot of our members, they're very active from a charitable perspective and from a volunteerism perspective. I think you're aware of the fact that through the MSC Foundation, a number of our members stepped up to feed nurses, docs, health professionals in Washington at the Washington Hospital System, also down in Greene County here a few weeks ago, and then up into Williamsport and into Wayne County, as well as in Susquehanna with Tunkhannock and hospitals and health systems in that area as well. So really proud of the fact that members stepped up to help feed health professionals. We've also had volunteerism activities across nearly every single company. And I know a big company like an Exxon, we do have one of their operating affiliates, XTO, active in Western Pennsylvania, have shifted a lot of operations to develop hand sanitizer and put a bunch of hand sanitizer on them on the open market free charge for a lot of folks. Volunteerism again coming into play to help keep people safe.
We really appreciate that, and please pass along to our members how grateful we are for their involvement in our community. We really appreciate all that they've been doing as well.
Yeah, thanks to a lot of the sponsors as well. I know several of them are members of the MSC. It's an interesting time. We're trying to take much of the information that we share online. So I want to thank the Washington County Chamber, a huge partner with the MSC, to try and help get our messages out as well.
Well, we appreciate that because we've been partners for a long time in the growth of the industry. And that kind of leads me to my next question. Pennsylvania's Independent Fiscal Office reported that, I believe for the 14th straight quarter, we've seen growth in the natural gas industry within Pennsylvania. And I believe Pennsylvania provides about 20% of the country's natural gas output. How do you see that continuing? First of all, do you expect it to continue, and how do you see that moving forward?
Production has dropped off a tad, Jeff. I would tell you, operators are far more efficient today than we were not long ago. Longer laterals, more frac stage completions has actually heightened production on a per well basis. So we're going to continue to be a world leader in natural gas development. I will say that operators are having to live within their free cash flow today. There's not a lot of open capital on the market. I talked a little bit a moment ago about the lack of demand from the commercial industrial sector, basically from the artificial shutdown that's occurred across our country. That said, about a little more than a third of our natural gas being produced in the U.S. is being used today in power generation. A little less than a third in the commercial industrial sector, and about a third in the residential commercial sector. So that's, it's a really nice balance. But the great part is we've seen, natural gas play such an important role in producing the energy that we use each day. I mean, certainly those issues have been and will be front and center in this election season. I think folks have learned what a great role natural gas and fossil fuels generally play in making sure we can keep the lights on, keep the heat on, have power uninterruptible 24/7, 365 days a year. And if you take a look inside of a nursing home or in an emergency room, just take a look around at the items that are being produced through the energy that we're producing right in Washington County. The IV drips, the ventilators, 90% of the medications that folks use, syringes, gowns, masks, hand sanitizers, just about everything that you touch in an emergency room or frankly in our everyday lives has been produced in some way with the energy that we're producing right here at home in Western Pennsylvania, right here across the state. As you said a moment ago, we are producing about 20% of America's natural gas supply right here in our region. Add in Ohio and West Virginia into that, and we're nearly a third of the nation's natural gas supply being produced in the Northeast. An extraordinary contribution in just a little over a decade. Let's face it, we just kind of put the pedal down on shale gas development, unconventional shale gas development in 2008, 2009, and here we are, have gone from producing 180 billion cubic feet of natural gas in 2008 to today producing 6.8 trillion cubic feet. I suspect we'll talk a little bit about, export markets. We've got, I think there's 8 or 9 LNG facilities either on the books or in operation. 4 or 5 on the books that are either under construction or being planned. The natural gas we produce here at home can bring some of the benefits that we're enjoying here, the ability to turn your lights on, the ability to heat your home, the ability to cook your food, to countries across the globe that don't have the modern conveniences that we have. They use wood or dung to cook their food, to heat their home. And as a result, they live shorter lifespans because their air quality has been dramatically reduced. And one of the things I wanted to mention, the fact that natural gas is being used so extensively now in power generation, every criteria pollutant that is measured just about has been reduced as a result of natural gas. So I would just say to those that are focused on climate like we are, is that natural gas is a solution. It's not, we're making progress, not, or the problems that exist, that some would say exist in our climate, can be improved through the use of natural gas. So we think we're a solution to the problem, and we're going to make every contribution that we can to continue to grow, not only on the power gen side, but on the industrial side as well.
You had a good comment earlier about demand, the demand for natural gas. How do you see the COVID-19 situation affecting that, both in the short and long terms?
Jeff, I've had a couple conversations with media folks, and I don't know if you'll have a question on pricing. If you do, I'm going to probably erode that right away. But price is at almost an all-time low. I put it in perspective. Natural gas pricing at the wellhead back in 2008 was north of $13. We're selling gas at $1.18 today at the primary connection points in Pennsylvania. $1.18, NYMEX price at about $1.68. So you can see the erosion because we're still working to try and get the infrastructure to get that gas to primary consuming regions of the country. But this stand down, COVID-19 stand down, has really impacted the downstream use from commercial industrial applications in particular. Some industrial applications have been deemed as life essential and continue to operate, some of those at max capacity, but many of our industrial applications have stopped operations, had a very significant impact on the demand for natural gas. So that's a big deal. Demand generally over a period of time has grown pretty dramatically. I mean, at one point we were, back in 2008, we were a little over 20, I think it was 23 trillion cubic feet of use across the country. Today, we're about 32 trillion cubic feet of use across the United States. That's primarily driven from natural gas being used in power generation. And your question is, how do I see us coming out of this? The fact that natural gas is so affordable, and we use energy in nearly everything that we do across our country. I think energy, and natural gas in particular, will be a catalyst to restart the engine of our economy. I think that we've seen new manufacturing, new business growth potentially start to take foot, primarily because of the availability of affordable and abundant natural gas that we have, now at our fingertips here in Pennsylvania. The ability to get that gas to market, especially in, I would call it, energy-starved communities. Look to the Northeast, New York, New England, they pay exponentially more for their power than we pay here. And put that in perspective, we've seen wholesale prices in the PJM grid drop 40%. Here in Western Pennsylvania, both Peoples and Columbia, their commodity rate, the bills are split, cost of service, cost of the commodity, but the commodity rates at Columbia, PA, and Peoples Natural Gas, our primary utility providers, are down more than 70% at both utilities. What a win for consumers, especially those on fixed incomes and those that have been impacted by COVID-19 that don't have the cash flow today that they once had. I think natural gas has made an extraordinary contribution to keeping money in the pockets of consumers, because of its affordability. So I believe that natural gas will be a catalyst for growth once we come out of this, and hopefully that's soon.
We wholeheartedly agree with you on that. And before, David, I ask you our next question in our discussion, I want to remind our participants that we will take questions. You're welcome to ask your questions on the Q&A button near the bottom of your screen for David and I to discuss. Our next question, David, is I've been reading in the Pittsburgh Business Times that many natural gas producers have seen their stock prices actually rise during this volatile time in the stock market. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, and what positives are you taking from that?
So it's been a tough ride for operators, and you and I talked at one point, Jeff, about being a little bit of a victim of our own success. I mean, we certainly produce an awful lot of natural gas there, and demand hasn't kept pace with what we're producing today, especially in our own state. But I believe. Repeat your question one more time, Jeff, for me.
Well, what I mentioned is a lot of the energy producers seen somewhat of their stocks rise.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked a little bit about this before, but the fact that Saudi and the Saudi Arabia and Russia put a glut of natural gas, or not glut of oil, onto the marketplace today, it eroded the competitiveness for the Permian Basin. Put that in perspective. I think I mentioned a moment ago, we have 24 active rigs in Pennsylvania. They had 460 active rigs in the Permian Basin, West Texas and New Mexico, primarily focused on oil. And that's been eroded by, a barrel of oil selling at south of $20 a barrel. But the byproduct or ancillary natural gas that was produced when drilling for oil was being thrown on the market at basically zero cost, flooding the market with free or very, very cheap natural gas that was eroding natural gas price. I think since this play's begun, it's the first time where natural gas has had a competitive edge from a price perspective over oil. Even though our price is constrained, oil at some points and natural gas liquids have sold very, very thin price. And as a result, it's allowed operators to compete head to head where they don't have to compete against free gas coming onto the market. So that's had a positive impact on pricing or on stock pricing for many of the Appalachian producers, folks that are active in our coalition, and we're pleased about that. I mean, some have talked about putting tariffs on imported oil. MSC's resisted that, and I think many in our industries resisted that. One, because it throws artificial money towards restart of the Permian that brings a lot of ancillary or free gas back on the market, and we don't think that's in America's best interest, and it could end up leading to tariffs on exports of LNG, and we think that's a huge opportunity for market growth, not only for our industry, but for Pennsylvania. I mean, let's face it, we have the furthest inland port in Philadelphia. We've been building pipelines to get natural gas liquids into that region. We've got the best workforce available to prepare facilities in eastern Pennsylvania to help us get LNG to market. We'd like to see LNG, begin to take foot in the Marcus Hook, Port of Philadelphia region to help us move those products into foreign land. And I think that folks in the administration are starting to get that. When I say the administration, I'm not talking about the Wolf administration. I'm talking about the Trump administration. I think we believe internationally energy is a strength of America. It can be a global competitive strength of our country and can give us a leg up with many nations. I mean, let's face it, 10 years ago, if you and I were sitting here talking today, we would have been 62% dependent on foreign sources of oil and in some cases foreign sources of other forms of energy as well. Today, I don't want to call it fully independent because we still bring oil in and out of our country pretty regularly. We're a far more energy secure nation today than we once were. And it's because of what's happened, not only across our country, but what's happened right here in the shale fields of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio.
We like to say here in the region that, the country's energy independence starts here, and I think you can agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, making major strides there. And, I was sitting at a traffic light not long ago behind the Gold Star mother, and a lot of folks say, why does energy independence really matter? Well, energy independence really matters because we've been sending young men and women into harm's way for decades to protect the free flow supply of oil into our country. Today, we're at a competitive advantage in that front, and I think it will limit our need to place, our, armed services in harm's way to protect oil flows back and forth across the seas.
Yeah, that's an important point.
Sure.
David, if I could keep you on the LNG exporting topic for a minute, we got a great question in concerning how are the LNG exporting facilities progressing. Over the weekend, this gentleman who wrote in said that he saw that Poland has started receiving LNG from the United States, thus competing and allowing them to have a choice of our natural gas versus importing it from Russia.
Yeah.
How are those facilities progressing?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Jeff. I can't claim to be an expert on LNG, but I will share this, that market also is very tight from a competitive standpoint. We need to be able to have options on where it goes. Today, we don't have a lot of options. I know Cove Point has been up and operational now for a little over a year. I mean, that's been an important location to move natural gas. The Sabine Pass facility being operated by Cheniere down in the Gulf Coast states is a primary location for LNG export as well. We believe that there's lots of opportunity for us to continue to develop LNG capability, as I mentioned a moment ago, Philadelphia, but no doubt there are countries that view the competitiveness of natural gas, LNG, as a primary way to energize their countries. And we think that we can play a significant role there. Certainly Poland being able to take LNG from different locations, that's happening, I believe, in a number of different countries, and we're watching that pretty close. We think we can play a role there. It's going to take us some time because building an LNG facility doesn't happen overnight. We've watched that over at the Shell facility in Monaca. It takes some time to build those major facilities like that, but once they're built, they can be a major opportunity for us. And this is a good opportunity for me as well to kind of shed a light on the partnership that's been developed with the working men and women in our communities, the building trades across our region, the ironworkers, the steam fitters, the plumbers and pipe fillers, the mechanical contractors, and I'll mention, IBEW, those guys have worked very, very hard and have been a wonderful partner, and guys and gals worked very, very hard to help us modernize the infrastructure we've got here in Pennsylvania to build the pipelines. I just mentioned one of the sponsors that, comes together with us all the time is the operating engineers. They are helping us modernize pipelines all across Pennsylvania. But as I was headed down that road a bit ago, we need to get infrastructure into the East Coast market. We need to get it into the Northeast market so that consumers can continue to enjoy the same benefits that we've got. A year ago, we didn't really have much of a winter this winter. A lot of folks have asked me about natural gas demand. You had a question there. I probably didn't mention it, Jeff, and I should have. As we came out of this winter with storage volumes, historically, Pennsylvania is a staging area for natural gas. Gas would come in here during the summer months. We would drive it into the ground, depleted production reservoirs, and stage gas here for use throughout the Northeast. And as winter would come on and demand would pick up, we would pull gas from storage. Now storage works a lot different. We park gas there. We use it in power gen during the summer, but we come out of this winter with storage volumes way ahead of where they've been in over the last 5 years. That certainly will have an impact on demand over this, early or late spring, early summer, primarily because we don't have to spend a lot of time refilling storage. Again, we need to get infrastructure up into New England. Last winter, we watched prices spike exponentially in the New England states for power. We watched the prices spike exponentially for natural gas when consumers in Pennsylvania at every single utility paid less than $5 for their natural gas. There were times during the winter months in New England, they paid more than $90 for the same commodity, the same amount of natural gas to heat their homes, cook their food, dry their clothes, or produce their power. And they had had a French vessel loaded in part with Russian LNG sitting in Boston Harbor for a good portion of the winter, basically to serve as floating storage for their natural gas utilities. Again, be corrected. A lot of folks have said it was a Russian tanker. It's actually the Gas Lees. It's a French vessel, but it was in part loaded with Russian LNG.
Well, that question came to us from our old friend, Tim Celebi. So I know he appreciated that as well.
Appreciate Tim's service. He's a great partner with us as well. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. The next question we have is concerning, there seems to be some thoughts about that many producers have sold their assets locally, and some may be focusing on the Permian Basin. Do you see that? Do you see any movement in the industry to refocus on this region at all?
It's a good question, Jeff. I think things need to sift themselves out a little bit after this COVID-19 thing. There's no doubt that margins are really tight. I think it's no secret that Chevron has announced that they're going to sell their assets and move out of this basin. Efficiencies are really, really important right now. I talked a little bit about some of that early on, about the longer laterals, more frac stages. I mean, very, very tight commodity market from a pricing perspective. This isn't for the weak of heart. Operators, as I said before, are operating within their free cash flow because capital markets in many cases have been closed to our industry for a while, especially, since demand is not ramped up heavily and there's such a glut of gas on the marketplace today. So, I think that we're going to see some convergence in our play. It's a difficult time from that perspective, and there'll be some assets sold, but there'll be winners and losers in that front. I think that we know that we've got world-class rock here in this region. When I say world-class rock, where we produce the natural gas from, this is a world-class energy play, and it's not going to go away. I mean, we're still demanding the products that we need to produce the products that we use every day. There's a lot of debate politically right now about the new Green Deal or moving to renewables. All I would share is there's no better partner for renewable energy than natural gas. I mean, when the electric utility brings 2%, wind and solar into their system, they got to be able to back up that 2% power with a reliable source, a non-interruptible source, and gas is the primary selection there because we can come on very, very quickly to back them up. So at night when solar power doesn't produce any electricity, gas comes into play. When the wind stops blowing, gas comes into play. I'd also mention that you can go top to bottom in a wind turbine or a solar panel and take a look at how those products are being produced. They're being produced with natural gas. So some have the belief that, we move to more renewable use, we can eliminate natural gas development. I would say, au contraire. I think we're a great partner. I think we're part of the new Green Deal. We're living that new Green Deal today. We've reduced air emissions across our country, including carbon dioxide emissions, dramatically, not in spite of natural gas, but because of natural gas.
Well, you mentioned, David, a little bit ago about the Shell cracker plant. We had a question or two concerning that. Where do you see that? How's that development coming?
So I've had a chance to meet with their leadership. They were quite a bit ahead of schedule. I think they were talking about possibly doing some testing of some of their equipment later this fall. I don't have an answer whether that's still on track or not, because like every industrial operation, even if they have been able to operate under essential service, and I don't believe, I think some of that work did, their pipeline work, for instance, but many of their operations stood down for a period of time. So whether they're on track to test fire later this fall, I think everyone had planned that kind of opening of that facility would be mid-2021. I think that based upon the good work of our building trades in our region, I think we're likely to do better than that from a testing phase standpoint. I know, I met back in late February with their leadership, and they were talking about the fact that they'd likely do test firing later this fall, early winter.
David, we got an interesting question concerning battery storage development. With battery storage development moving forward at a rapid pace and electric vehicle development progressing in all sizes of vehicles, how do you feel that the vehicular technology will progress and affect our natural gas needs moving forward?
So I'm probably not the best one to ask about that, because I get a little twisted about folks that think that I cut the cord, so to speak, by eliminated the use of fossil fuels by buying an electric vehicle. First of all, I look at a Tesla, and the new Teslas, they're like 60% of the products used in that were produced with oil or natural gas.
Yeah.
And you can go right around from the paints and polymers to the tires, to the plastics, to the interiors. They're all produced with natural gas, and with natural gas liquids. The primary source of power, electricity, requires battery storage. So when a lot of folks say, what's it mean if we go to a million vehicles or 2 million vehicles? It means a ramp up of rare earth metals mining. And guys, I want to tell you, if you Google rare earth metals mining, it makes a shale well look like a Sunday picnic. I would tell you, it's a very intrusive process. People say, well, why would you need to do that? Well, think about it. A battery requires, lithium, neodymium, cobalt, the things that you produce in rare earth metals mining to develop battery storage. So let's put it in perspective. A Tesla S uses like 7,200 of these cell phones, equivalent lithium-ion batteries. For each of those lithium-ion cell phones, there are 8 rare earth metals in there. And each of those rare earth metals produce toxic tailings that need to be treated as hazardous waste. So where does that all go? Folks have tried to make this statement that a move to electric vehicles is going to clean our environment. I actually think it's a very intrusive from an environmental standpoint. Well, there may not be tailpipe emissions from that vehicle. You got to look life cycle. And the fact that we're going to have huge battery storage, I mean, it's almost laughable when folks say, well, we're going to develop this new Green Deal to power our entire society on renewables. That requires an enormous development of batteries to be able to meet the swings in power demand that come from consumers. I don't think it's doable. I actually don't believe it's doable. So, it's less than 1% of what today they have available from a battery storage standpoint. It would be an enormous ramp up, hugely intrusive from a mining perspective. Most of that rare earth metals mining today occurs in China, where there's virtually no environmental regulation over the production of those materials. And I think long term, I think folks are starting to realize how incredibly important it is to have the reliability and the contributions that are being made by the energy that we're producing right here in our backyards in Washington County.
David, we have a rather interesting question, a lighthearted question. A lot of people are at home now watching Netflix, Hulu, and everything else. And the one question that came through was, had you had a chance to watch Michael Moore's new documentary on renewable energy and its effect on the ecosystem? I think it's called Planet of the Humans. Any thoughts on the film?
Yeah, I watched it yesterday for the first time, and I don't think you would ever caught me saying, folks, you need to watch that movie, but I think it's a film that I would say folks need to watch. I mean, I think many folks on the environmental side are now starting to realize the fool's errand that they've been trying to paint, that this new Green Deal, I call it the new Brown Deal, because I have a feeling that it has more impact on the environment if we would go that direction, far more of an impact upon the environment to go that direction than what we're doing today. I think, we have the strongest environmental regulations in the country. And again, I know you asked a question about the movie, Jeff, and I encourage folks to watch that movie. I think it's a great portray. It's basically moderated by a strong environmentalist, a guy that moved into the woods with supposedly no environmental footprint. He narrates it to kind of show the impact that would have. But anyhow, folks are starting to realize that, I think, across our country, how vitally important the energy that we're producing here at home is to fuel our economy.
Well, David, thank you very much. We wish we could continue this discussion all morning, but we certainly appreciate your time. We glad you're being safe and that your family's healthy. And please know how much the Chamber appreciates your continued partnership with us in moving natural gas and the energy of Washington County forward. So David Spigelmyer, thank you for being with us this morning.
Jeff, thank you and the Washington Chamber for all you do to support our energy industry and for being such a great partner with the MSC. And thanks, folks, for logging in this morning.
Thank you, David. I'd also again like to thank our partners, Civil Environmental Consultants, ARC Human Services, Energy Transfer, and CDMG for being such great partners in supporting this program this morning. Next week, May 7th at 8 o'clock, we'll welcome Michele Tasome, Vice President and Senior Regional Officer of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. We'll talk about economic development, the economy, and where we are moving forward. So again, thank you for being with us this morning on Morning Briefing, and have a wonderful day.